Okay, hello everybody, welcome to this insane in the endgame lecture where we are supposed to check complicated endgames, or at least very interesting. My name is Pepe, I'm a Grandmaster from Spain, and if you have any questions during the lecture, please don't hesitate to ask. And you know that a lot of people say that the Immortal Polish game was played between Glucksberg and Najdorf in Varsovia in 1935. But some other people say that there is even a better game. And while doing research for this lecture, I found a really interesting game between two Polish players, and where the end game is extremely interesting. So this is the game that I want to show you, and it was played in Poznan, one of my favorite cities actually, because I studied in Dansk in the north of Poland for a semester, and then we used to go every weekend to Poznan for some fun. And it was played between Tylkowski and Antoni Wojciechowski. I'm not so sure if my Polish pronunciation is the best, but all right. And this game has a lot of controversy that I will try to explain at the end of the lecture, because 2 years later there were two other players in Spain that managed to get the same position at the end of the game. And then a lot of people say that they just prepared that, they just cheated, so in order to reach that extremely beautiful end game, so one of the opponents could finish in a really beautiful way the game. Some other people say that this game between the Polish players was not played in 1931, but after the Spanish game. So I actually have no clue, and we cannot be sure about that, but we can be sure about the beautifulness of the game. So let's go over. Tylkowski played f4 in this position in the move number 1. Let me see if, yeah, now the software is working. You know how this defense, how this opening is called? Some of you? The Spanish, the Italian, the English? No, it's called the bird's opening, okay? And it's like a Dutch defense, but with reverse colors. It's not the most popular, of course, because you know you're weakening already your king in the first move, right? And okay, so black continued with d5 controlling the center, e3, c5, knight f3, and knight c6. What do you think about the center here? Which is the most important square? e5, f5, d4, e4. So everything is going to happen about the e5 square. So that's why you normally want to go bishop b5 to put pressure on the knight on c6. So then you gain more control of the e5 square. So that's why in the game bishop b5 was played. We have to say that the quality of this game is not very good. At least in the opening and in the middle game, because we're talking about the game from the 40s, right? So it's not a game between Kramnik and Magnus Carlsen. But still the game is quite interesting. So bishop g4 was played, pinning this knight from f3, and now short castle and e6. You want to develop finally the king side, the bishop from f8 and the knight from g8, and then you want to go short castle in the next move. So here, how would you develop the queen side here? You have to develop these minor pieces. How would you do it? Tracy, do you have any suggestion?
Maybe c4 and then knight to c3.
C4 is actually a very interesting move. So just trying to explode the center here. So how do you develop the c1 bishop? C4 is a very interesting move. But you can also go d3 or b3. Actually, both of them are quite reasonable. In the game, they went for d3. Now bishop e7 was played in order to continue with knight f6, and here knight c3, just developing another minor piece. So these moves are kind of natural here. In the game, black went for d4. So this is not very recommended. So you normally first wanna finish development with knight f6, then put your king in a safe place, and then maybe strike in the center with d4. But here, after d4, where would you go with your knight? to e2, to a4, to e4, or to b1. You can also take the pawn, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to move the piece, right? So, if you have to vote between e4 and b1, where would you go? E4. It's much more natural, yeah? The piece is to the center, so the knight on e4 is developed. In the game, they went to b1. This is, of course, not a very good move because you never want to go back here. There's no reason. The knight on e4 is putting pressure on c5, controlling important squares such as d6 and f6. So knight b1, not the best move, and knight f6 was played here. Now white continued with e4. So that's actually a natural move. I would have preferred to take first on c6 because now after e4 you give black the opportunity to reinforce this c6 knight, let's say by queen b6 or queen c7, and now you want to take this knight, then black's able to recapture with the queen. So, and his pawn structure on the queen side is not ruined. So that's why after e4 black played short castle here. Again, I prefer queen c7 to reinforce this knight on c6, but they went short castle, allowing bishop takes c6. Now b takes c6. What color would you take here? You had to play this game. White or black? And why? So one of the most difficult things in chess is just to evaluate a position. Who's better here? Why? Who has the advantage? Even a lot of grandmasters fail in this, yeah, in not so much complicated positions. So who has the better structure? White, yeah. So we don't have double pawns. So white has a really nice square for this knight on b1 on c4, right? And then you could say that black has the bishop pair. That's a fact, and this is always something important. But actually, after h3. Black is going to have to give up the bishop pair because you go to h5, then g4 and f5 wins a piece, right? So that's why black has the bishop pair, but just for some minutes. So I would take white with no doubt in this position. This knight on c4 is doing a fantastic job, and then I also have some attacking chances on the king side. In the game, white went c3. I don't like this move at all because I would have preferred to go knight a3 or knight d2 in order to go knight c4, but c3 has a small problem. Let's see if you guys can find the best move here for black. It's a really tough move, and basically the idea is to get rid of your ugly pawn structure. c4, great. c4, the point is that this pawn on e4 is hanging. So after c takes d4, you can always take on f3 and then take on d4 followed by queen takes d3. And if you take this pawn here, then I can imagine you can take this pawn here on e4, or maybe you can even take on c3. But c4 was a really good move. After c3, black took on c3. Now knight takes c3, bishop f3, rook takes f3, and knight to g4. That's a move that is threatening something, actually. What is black threatening here in this position? I mean, if I go, for example, stupid move like a3 or bishop d2. So black to move here after bishop d2. What do you play? Black moves and wins material. Queen d4. Exactly. What happens if the king goes to f1? Sorry. Yeah, knight h2 fork, winning material. If you go to h1, knight f2 check, you are forced to take on f2 and then you won an exchange, right? So that's why after knight g4, white plays a prophylactic move, king h1. So now there's no check on d4, but anyway, black goes queen d4 here, threatening queen f2. And now what would you play here with the white pieces. I mean, there are many ways to stop knight f2. I see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways.
I really annoyed with black's dark square control, so I would try queen g1, get the hostile queen out of there.
Queen g1 is the move that they tried in the game. I don't like this move because, okay, after queen takes e1, king takes e1, I think the endgame is more or less equal. But for example, if you go something like queen e1 or queen e2, let's say queen e1, now your next move is going to be a3. And this knight has to waste another tempo because it has no active squares to jump. And then you're going to develop this bishop with another tempo. So basically, you're winning so many tempi. And white is actually much better. You have also some attacking ideas against black skin. But queen g1, of course, is not a bad move. You parry the threat, and after queen takes e1, king takes e1, now black has this terrible bishop, and Antoni Wojciechowski tried to activate it by playing bishop d8. His idea was to go bishop b6 here in this position. Again, it was interesting at this point to go c4 and then try to look for some kind of contemplate. After d takes c4, there's bishop c5 check. Again, it's not easy to go to f1 because there is knight h2. It's not easy to go to h1 because there are some checks on f2 which are really nasty here. So after king takes e1, bishop d8, just going for some trick, cheap trick I will say. Bishop d8, now white went bishop e3, a move that I don't like, of course, because you could go, for example, a3, kick this knight back, and then you can develop the bishop, put pressure on c5, and then sooner or later this pawn is going to fall. You can go knight a4, you can go rook c1, and there's going to be so much pressure on c5 that this pawn is going to fall. But after bishop d8, white went bishop e3. We're saying that this game is not the best game in the world, but the end game you're going to see. So knight takes e3, rook takes e3, and now bishop b6. What do you think black is trying to do in the next move if we don't react correctly? It looks quite easy, right? Black's threat. So what's black's threat here?
c4.
c4, right? So this bishop is looking our king with x-rays, and also the rook. There could be a nasty ping here on this diagonal. So that's why in the game white went rook d1 here. I would have preferred to go something like king f1, then c4. I just remove my rook, but then in the game they went for rook d1, and now black player went for h6, a move that is actually not so good because you don't need still some pressure to your king. The game is focused on the center, and now it was important to go for c4 in this moment. So you are forced to play something with white here. What do we have to play? d4 only move. Otherwise, we're gonna lose some material, right? So d4 only move. And now, what would you play here with black? Now it's an important moment. It's really an important moment. So my question is, would you go f6 or c5? What we want to do is we want to open this diagonal for sure, yeah? So this bishop gets active, and then we can pose some problems to white here. But how do we do it? How do we start, with c5 or f6? What's the idea behind f6? And is that idea good? Or I mean, let's put it like this. What do you play here with the white pieces after c5? There's only one good move. Knight b5 to protect d4, knight e2. You said something else?
d5.
d5 is the best move by far, because you close this diagonal. You don't want this bishop to get active, right? And then we saw that there's a lot of trouble going on in this diagonal, so you don't want to open it. If you play something like knight b5, you're gonna lose almost immediately after a6, because now you are forced to go back, and then c takes d4 with a fork here to the rook and the knight. Then there's also this cover check here going on. Basically, you blundered everything in this position. So that's why after c4, d4, f6 was very, very interesting, because now you want to go e5. And then if you manage to go e5, then the center is going to explode here for white. And then there's going to be so much trouble going on in this diagonal. So probably the only move is e5, and then there's a lot of tension with this rook fd8, for example. And it's not easy to protect the d4 pawn. How would you try to protect the d4 pawn now? There are two ways. Rook e2 or knight e2. Rook e4, sorry, or knight e2. Knight e2, why? Why not rook e4? f5, yeah. Rook e4, you play f5, then deviation, this rook has to go back, and then you take this free pawn. Okay, so after rook d1 in the game, c4 was really, really interesting, followed by f6, but then they decided to go for h6. All right, and now e5 was played by Tylkowski. Again, not the best move. What would you try here with the white pieces? We said that we are in trouble in this diagonal, so what do we do? If I was playing there, I would just try to remove pieces.
Out of the way.
Yeah, and the king, for example. Yeah, the rook and the king. For example, rook f3 or king f1. But we don't want to be in this diagonal. Now after c4, we can decide if we want to play d4, or we can even now remove the rook and bring it back to e1 or f3, whatever, yeah? But they went for e5. Now another mistake by our friend Antoni Wojciechowski. So hard Polish to learn, yeah? I was there for 6 months. I just learned like 2 words, I think. So good morning and cheers, yeah? Nazdrovia. And how was good morning? I already forgot. Dzień dobry, dzień dobry. All right, so what do we play now with the black pieces? They gave us another chance. So?
C4.
C4? Yeah, we have to open this diagonal for this bishop, and then the only move is d4. And now, what will you play? c5 or rook d8? c5 has a problem. Same problem as before. They close the diagonal with d5. So therefore rook d8 is better. And now if we go knight e2, are we now ready to strike in the center with c5 or not? Tracy, are we ready to rumble here with c5? Yeah, but now there is a difference, because now we are protecting the d5 square with 2 pieces. So now we can just take this pawn for free. And this is just a pawn for free. So black would be winning here. So it was the time, again, to go for c4. But in the game, they went for f6. Okay. Another interesting but bad move, I would say. So e takes f6, rook takes f6, and now rook f3. Finally, white player, moved away from this diagonal, and now they went for c4. Not the best moment, but still, okay. They managed to activate this b6 bishop. Again, now it was just much better to go king f1, so no pieces in this diagonal, but then they decided to close with d4, and now, again, rook d8 was a better move, because after c5, now you can imagine finally what happened in the game. d5, exactly. d5 was played. E takes d5, rook takes d5, king h7, was played, and now rook d7. It's always very important to bring this rook to the 7th rank. I mean, rooks in general in endgames should come to the 7th rank. They are extremely active over there. So in the game, black decided to go for this trade of rooks, which looks like natural to me because this rook on a8 was extremely passive, and then this rook was very, very active. So that's why rook d8 is an interesting move, and white decided to keep this rook on the 7th rank. Rook g6 was played, trying to go for rook d2 and put pressure here on g2. But the thing is, actually, there's not so much pressure going on. You can play almost anything here, but not the move that they went in the game. They went for rook g3, which was not very good. You could play g3, for example, because now after rook d2, there is a good move for white here. Whoa. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. So, white to move. Counterplay. We have a majority on the king side. Can we use it? With a tempo? So if we have to use this majority here on the king side, what pawn would you move? F5, right? Because now you win a tempo here, and then you are threatening also f6 in the next move. Let's say if black goes to c6, then f6 just wins the game, because you can't take here, because after rook f6 there is a pin, and then you cannot recapture on f6. And if you go rook f6, now we can bring another guy to the action. Exactly, 94. Very good move, Tracy. Because now we are pushing away this rook from f6, and then we are going f6, winning the game. All right, as we said in the game, they went for rook g3, rook takes g3, h takes g3, rook d2, and now white went and protect the b2 pawn. And this is actually one of the key moments in the game. I couldn't believe what happened in this endgame when I saw the moves, the line that comes now. It's just so amazing. So do you see any ideas? I'll give you like 1 minute to think. Also, the guys in YouTube, you can think too about this position. I'll actually open the chat so to see if you guys have an idea. So I see Carlos Costa, Andrew V, a lot of people there. So guys, also in the YouTube channel, you see any ideas after knight a4? Looks like white managed to defend everything. Now white could also escape with his king via h2. Also, maybe white is threatening to take on b6 at some point, and then b2 seems protected. Okay. What do you see here? C3 is interesting, of course, but the problem with c3, okay, there is no real problem, but I think black can just take with the pawn, and then after rook a2, knight b6, and you got nothing, yeah, because after a takes b6, rook takes b6, and then this is probably gonna be a draw, but nothing special for white. It looks like a stupid move, what they played in the game, but it's actually a winning move. Sacrifice the rook on b2, but of course, why? And then do we see the whole line? Because we have to calculate the whole line. Here somebody said rook b2, Marwan and Harmon, rook b2, but then we have to see what happens after knight takes b2. So let's try to calculate without moving the pieces, okay? This is the way to improve in chess.
Rook b2, knight
Knight b2.
Do on c3.
Yeah, and for example, what happens if I go knight d3?
Pawn c2.
Okay, let's see what you're saying. Takes, c3, knight d3, pawn c2, and then, for example, I'll just go knight c1. And it looks like I'm just a rook up, happy with my life. I'm gonna come here now to take your pawn on c2. So rook b2 is correct, but now after c3, knight d3 is actually a bad move, but for a reason. And the reason is not c2. Always the same theme in this game, yeah, after knight d3. Somebody saw it already in the YouTube channel, Sunil Urkude. It's the same idea, all the game with the black pieces. c4, Tracy, that's it. c4 check. And now, if you go with the king, let's say, to f1, now you're going to take this knight here, and then these two pass pawns joined by this bishop are going to win the game. So c4 check. And if rook takes b6, what do you play? Sorry? Capture d3, that's the best move. I mean, if you capture on b6, you lost the game. Because now knight b4, you block c2, you bring the king, you capture all these guys here, and then black has to resign. So you have to take this knight on d3, and there is no way of stopping these two pawns. Maybe you can try. For example, if you go rook b3, I'll go c2. You can't take this pawn because there is c1, and then let's say rook b3, c2, or d2, whatever works, rook c3, and now d2, rook takes, and d1, and black wins the game. Same story happens after king f2. Well, not the same story. Now you gotta be careful. What do you play now? d2 or c2? It's really important now. Sorry? And d2? Why is not working d2?
C allows the king to get closer.
Exactly. So d2 loses actually, because now after king e2, you cannot push your pawns. After c2, I just take this pawn and keep an eye on this c1 square. So you gotta go c2 here. Now the only move for white to stop that pawn is rook c6, and now d2, right? So now you have to capture here, and then d1 just wins the game. So we saw that after rook b2, knight takes b2, c3, knight d3 is not working. So knight c4 is not working because now c2, and then there's no way of stopping this guy here again. So white has to take on b6. And what do we play now with the black pieces? c2 loses. Why? Because of knight d3. Stops a pawn.
So you play c4 first?
Exactly, c4 here. Amazing move. And what do we do now with the white pieces? We cannot take on c4 because after c2, black's winning. And then our threat is quite simple. So basically, if you do nothing, I will go c2 in the next move, and then c1, unstoppable. So, can you find a way for white to protect this, to defend this? I see some. So what do you guys see? What's your best try here to stop those pawns? So we have to take in mind that black has already sacrificed a rook and a piece. But we have these little twins, Carlitos twins, on the c file, and how do we stop them? Guys, in the YouTube channel, do you have any ideas how to stop these C pawns? Okay, I'm gonna suggest you something. How about rook c6? What do you play now with the black pieces? Rook c6 is losing immediately, but then you have to find a way. Sorry? Yeah, c takes b2, then there's no way of stopping b1, right? But now I'm gonna give you a tricky move now for white. Rook b4. And then imagine you have 10 seconds in the clock and then you have to make a move with the black pieces. a5, do you see any other move? I mean,
just wait.
Sorry? Just wait, you said? So, for example, with king g6 or something? I mean, if you wait, now my threat, of course, is to take this pawn on c4. Now you take this knight on b2, there's rook b4, and then white wins the game. So, you said a5. Something else? a5 is actually a brilliant move. Boom. Sorry, not king g6, but instead a5. Because now, if white takes on c4, then c takes b2, and then you cannot go back to b4 because now this square is covered by the a5 pawn, right? So a5 is a brilliant move that wins the game, but still we have to calculate one more line. So basically we are threatening against c2. If knight takes c4, there is c2. If rook takes c4, there is c takes b2. I mean, I'm also attacking the rook, so if you play king f2, then I'll just collect your rook and then I'll promote the queen. So what's your best try here for white? I see a line which is not so clear to me anymore. So we have to try to defend this position with the white pieces.
Rook a4.
Rook a4, the problem is c takes b2. So guys in YouTube, you see a defense here or not? Rook b3. Rook b3 just loses again because c takes b3. Rook a4 loses, rook b3 loses.
Knight b4.
Knight b4, knight takes c4. You mean this one?
No, knight a4.
Knight a4, it has the following problem. A takes b4. And now c2 and c1 is impossible to stop. So that's also the problem. Our two heavy pieces are hanging to. So somebody saw it in the YouTube channel. Zaharin. He says knight takes c4. Knight takes c4 because now he wants to take this pawn on a5. Sorry. He wants to take this pawn on a5, and after c1 he wants to hide this king on h2, and then we have one rook, one knight, and 2 pawns for the queen, which is like 10 points versus 9 points. But there is a line which is very good for black, and then you win some material. Let's see if you find it from this position. So c2, now it's white to play. You have to compute the following line. Knight a5, c1 queen, king h2, and then there is a move that wins the game on the spot. Queen c5, and how about rook a4 over there?
Queen h5.
And how about king g1. You are almost there.
Queen d1.
Very good. Okay. There is an easier way. So knight takes a5, c1, king h2, and now you could give the check straight away. No, sorry, queen c5. Now rook a4, and then you found a really nice way. Rook h5, only move king g1, queen to d1, and then check. The king has to go again to h2 or f2, and then this rook falls. Is queen b5 winning? How? So, I mean, the only move here for white is rook a3. So now black wins. How? Keep attacking pieces. Exactly, queen b4. That's it. There's no way to protect both pieces now. You gotta move this rook, and then this knight is gonna fall, and black's winning. Okay, so this was the game. Now I have two more, or at least one more endgame. This time it's going to be a composition, so we're not going to check the whole game. But this is a really nice game because the endgame, you see this sacrifice is just unbelievable. I couldn't believe, like when I saw this position, rook takes b2 wins, come on. But actually it wins. Remember the sequence, c3, c4, and a5. So really, really beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna show you now. Let me see if this is, yeah, this is the game. This is actually a composition from a Georgian composer, which is called Jurgenidze. And I love solving artistic endgames because you know, it's normally there are no positions. We don't find there positions that correspond to real chess games from tournaments. But it helps a lot to improve our creativity because the solutions are extremely difficult. In this position, it's white to move, and it looks like we're going to lose almost immediately because f1 queen is coming. So what do? We have to find desperate measures here. Do you see any ideas? I mean, we're in a desperate situation. We have to find some checkmate net or something like that. So the first move is more or less clear, right? A5. A5, and then only move king a6, and suddenly we realize that if we manage somehow to give a check to that king, will be made. So what ideas in a perfect future come to your mind? Let's say like you have 3 tempi. Yeah, you can play 3 times. So how do you checkmate this king?
King a4.
And then b4,
Yeah.
and then b5. Imagine that you have another perfect dream, and then you have another 3 moves to play, and there is another way to checkmate that king. You have 3 moves. I'm giving you 3 moves. This maneuver is not the only one to checkmate that king. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Exactly. Somebody saw it in the YouTube channel. Very good. My friend Sunil. So, you guys, I mean, if we are not going to checkmate this guy with this pawn, then we have to use another piece. The only remaining piece that can give a check is this guy. So how do we bring the bishop to the action? 3 moves. Okay, here it's even easier, yeah? So with 2 moves, then we checkmate this king. Yeah, bishop c2 and bishop d3. But there's another route. Tracy, you saw it with this bishop?
Did we already do e3?
Sorry?
Move the pawn to e3.
And then?
And then the bishop to g4.
And then?
And then the bishop to c8.
Okay. So this is going to be very important when solving this exercise. This exercise is actually very, very difficult. Okay, just try it. So because, okay, if we play king a4, now f1, b4, we are not on time to play b4. Why? Queen captures the bishop, and then this king will escape. So actually king a4 is not the solution. And if king a4 is not the solution, then we have only 2 moves. e3 and e4. e4, okay, let's see what happens. e4, f1, and now what do you want to play?
Bishop g.
Bishop.
You have how many moves?
Sorry?
How many moves?
Just one. Yeah, but I mean, the move you're suggesting is quite nice because you are threatening checkmate in 1 move on c8, right? So the only move here for black is Queen f8, right. And now, let's say I want to go king a4. What would you play now with the black pieces? e4 is actually a bad move that loses, but it's not that easy to see why. Our idea is quite simple now. We want to go b4 and b5. Queen b8, I think it's losing actually. Why? Because I go b4. You want to go queen b5, I guess. And then after king b3, you have no moves. The only move you can do is queen b8. And then I can lose as many tempi as I want. I could play, for example, bishop f5, then you have to go queen b5, right? Because you have no other moves. Well, queen b5 is actually checkmate. So you will have to go, well, I'm not so sure about this. Let me think. This is a draw because I can go king a4, and then you have to go back to b5. Because if you move the queen now away, then there's b5 checkmate, right? So queen b8 is, at the best for black, is a draw. But there is a move here that wins the game after king a4 for black. Find another nice diagonal. Yeah, somebody saw it here. Pazio Wati. So instead of b8, where do you want to go?
Queen h8.
Queen h8. That's a good move. And now you are, after b4, of course, you got queen a1. But I'm gonna make a tricky try. e5. What do you play now? You want to take this pawn with the queen? Because there is checkmate on c8, right? So you can take this pawn with the queen. But now you can actually go to b8. There is a big difference now because the d5 pawn is not protected. So again, if we try to do the same thing as before, now queen b5, king b3, and remember the previous position. The pawn was on e4, so now we can just simply take this pawn on d5. and black wins. So that's why there are so many subtleties, right, in chess. It's so difficult. So e4 loses because of this maneuver. Queen f8, queen h8. We force e5, and now we go back to b8. So e4 is not working. So what do we play and why? E3. But let's try to understand the whole line. So e3, f1, bishop g4, queen f8. Somebody says e3 looks better to protect e4, sorry, d4. Sorry? King a4. So e3, f1, king a4 over there. No, bishop g4.
After queen f8.
Oh, so e3, f1, bishop g4, queen f8, king a4, queen b8. Okay, let's move the pieces a little bit. So e3, so it will be easier to calculate. d1, bishop g4, threatening checkmate on c8, queen f8, and now it's one of the key moments. Bishop e6, somebody's saying. Bishop e6 doesn't help much because now I want to go queen b8 check, king a4, queen b5, king a3, and queen a5, and white loses. So we cannot waste a lot of time here after queen f8. We have to be fast. I mean, black's strategy is to go queen b8 and queen b5. So any ideas? Okay, I'll give you the next move. Is king a4. What do you think black has to play here now? Actually, there are two alternatives. Two interesting alternatives. I mean, we saw the idea before, right? With the black pieces. So what will you play? Queen where?
B8.
Queen b8 is a move, or queen h8? Both are reasonable. And I think the game is a draw with both of them. Let's say queen h8. Now, we didn't see this idea before in this position, so now you have to think and try to figure it out. I mean, if we do nothing special, black is going to have queen a1, and then we just lose. Let's say we play b4, queen a1, check, king b3, and king b5, and then it's time to resign. Because now later is coming queen b1 followed by queen b4. So it's not that difficult because it's kind of forced. Nobody in the YouTube channel? Mauro, Felipe, Sunil, bishop f5. Again, bishop f5 doesn't work. Too slow. Too weak, too slow. Queen a1 and the a5 pawn falls. Sorry? Bishop f8 is illegal move, right?
Sorry, not.
c8. Actually, this is a brilliant move. Bishop c8. But then you're going to tell me why after taking here.
Push the d pawn.
I push the pawn, queen b8,
Dang.
and you think this is over? Or it's not over? Is this over or is this a draw?
First stage pawn.
Oh, you almost did it. Because now queen b5, and then I collect this guy here on d5.
Oh,
Almost.
e4.
Exactly, e4 here. And incredibly, this position is a draw. Because now there's only one possible move for black. Okay, you can play h5 and I can play h4. But then there's only one move for black here not to lose immediately, which is queen b5 check, right? If you move the queen to any other square, b5 is checkmate, queen b5, and now king b3. The key is that the d5 pawn is protected. So there's only one good move for black here, which is queen c4? No, right? Queen b8, exactly, keeping the queen in the board. Now king a4, and then there is a triple repetition. Would you take here on a5? Is this winning for black? Is this winning for white? I mean, what happens here after king a5? Who wins? Black, white to move.
e5.
e5, great. How about if I take? How about if I go king b6?
d7.
d7, right, perfect. Okay, so this is the key. So that's why in this position, black can take on a5. It has to go to b8, and after king a4, the position is a draw. You see why these exercises are so interesting? Because, you know, this is almost never going to happen in a real chess game, in a tournament. But it gives you a way to improve your creativity for another kind of positions in a chess game, right? Okay, so we saw this Polish Immortal endgame with sacrificing the rook on b2 and then pushing c3, c4, and then this composition from Jurgenitze. So this will conclude the lecture for today. So thank you for coming.